Welcome to Yoga is Science, the podcast where Western medicine meets Eastern philosophy. I'm Colynn Vosburgh, a former emergency room nurse and medical student turned full-time yoga teacher. With over 200 teacher trainings taught, I've come to understand how yoga really is the original science of life. And I'd love you to join me as we explore the profound ways that ancient wisdom and modern science intersect to support healing, growth, and transformation. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome. So today we are talking Yoga is Science podcast, and what I chose to look at today is the Kleshas. So Kleshas. I've heard it said as the Kleshas. I am not a Sanskrit expert, so never will I claim to be. So let's take a moment to dive into, this is part of the sutras, which we'll definitely spend a lot of time diving into. I think based on how I teach, vulnerability and authenticity come in. And so I'm sharing around something that I'm moving through myself, suffering. So the sutras are really like a guidebook for living a meaningful and purposeful life. So if you want a meaningful and purposeful life, you are complete with stressing, suffering, being unhappy, then, just follow this book and you will have a life that is meaningful and purposeful, which contributes to living longer, and I think in a higher quality of life. So the kleshas, the translation is either the obstacles to happiness or the causes of suffering, whichever way you look at the translation. These are the reasons why we suffer. And there's 5 of them, and that's it. So the first one is ignorance. So the reason that we suffer is because we're ignorant. And the concept or the idea here is not to attach to your label, emotion, or feeling around what you think ignorant means. The idea is just like ignorant means that you don't know. So you suffer because you don't know. What don't you know? Well, in the yogic philosophy, I want you to think about God as more like the universe and less like God, less like a dude that is sitting up on a cloud, like watching every single thing that you do so that he can judge you or damn you to hell. The universe, nature, love, source, those words more reflect my interpretation of what yoga calls like the Lord of Yoga. And while there's many deities, you can look at them more like energy. And since yoga is science, at the base of everything, we are energy. And if you ask physics, what is energy? The answer is like energy is. That's it. And so if you ask theologists, what is God? The answer also is God is. So there's a connection of science and religion that a lot of people don't like to dive into, but it's there. There's a connection. In fact, there's a book I read by Deepak Chopra, and he began it by saying that science is the explanation of God by God to the human nervous system. And I mean, that's huge. So if you're triggered by the word God, then stay in your suffering because it's an important part to the lesson. And it's an opportunity to heal whatever you feel or the the relations or the feelings or the emotions or the memories that you have around your experience with religion. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, what are you ignorant to? And you are ignorant to the fact that you are God. So that can really be like, some people are like, see you later. But what if we think of it? I like spirit science's explanation of what happened, which takes into account everything. So, spirit science, if you want to check it out, Sacred Geometry movie, it talks about the fact that like consciousness became aware of itself. That's it. Like consciousness was floating around, and then all of a sudden it became aware of itself. And when it became aware of itself, it recognized it was in a void, that it was dark, and therefore created light. And then we have a recount of situations that happened over 7 days, though we have to think about this. Like, I still hear spiritual teachers talk about how everything in existence right now was created in 7 days. And we have to think about, like, first there was nothing, and then there was the potential for everything. So a day wasn't just 24 hours. Like a day is 24 hours now, according to our consciousness within co-creation of consciousness. Okay, so it can go a little far, and that's okay. Quantum physics is kind of mind bending. And so I don't go too far into it with my own learning, because then I'm like, then I go to like, why? And then I think like, why am I even here? And it's not helpful. So I'm taking you on a journey to get comfortable with the idea of God or the universe or whatever your version of God is, because that's what it is. And you're a part of it, is the belief of yoga. And therefore, would you ever call God stupid or fat or ugly or dumb? Probably not. But this is something to think about, because you probably have had those thoughts in your mind about yourself. Maybe not every single one, or maybe all of them. But the reason that you suffer is because you have forgotten that you are like God or a part of God. If you believe in the line of thinking that you are one drop from the ocean, and when you are complete in this physical body for this physical round, then your drop goes back to the ocean when you're complete here. And then when it comes out again, it's never like this situation. It's never Colynn ever again. So when you are a part of that, then you can recognize that you're actually amazing. You are a miracle. There is no ugly or stupid or fat, because wherever was the comparison of, like, if let's just say two trees side by side, like trees don't think, oh, you're better than me. You have stronger wood than me. And so the very first reason that we suffer is because we're ignorant to who we truly are. And yoga talks about the true self on the regular. And the true self is that part of you, the impartial witness. You know the saying, maybe, maybe not. It's one of my favorite, and it's like, you are not here as a human having a spiritual experience. You're a spirit here having a human existence. And how would you totally experience the human experience if the part of you that is truly you had an opinion? So the part of you that is true doesn't have an opinion. It's an impartial witness that's here, that's observing, that's experiencing consciousness, that is co-creating this world. So you suffer because you forget that you're amazing. Like literally, if we want to translate it to something that's edible, is like, you're fantastic. And labels are just that, and they're completely false. And so any argument that you have to me right now when I say you are fantastic is exactly why you're suffering, because you don't recognize that. And I mean, I went to med school. So the citric acid cycle, that's the level of using oxygen to fuel a cell to do its job. And it's complex, like really complex. And you can only see this happen under a microscope. That's pretty amazing. And you're doing that like 34 trillion cells, 20 breaths per minute. Like you're fantastic. So why don't you recognize that? So that brings you to suffering number 2 is ego. So when you're ignorant to who you truly are, then you misidentify. And who do you misidentify as? You misidentify as your body, as your thoughts, and as your emotions. You misidentify as your ego. When we relate the ego to science, it's your nervous system and or Manamaya Kosha. We haven't gotten there yet, but we will. So the body made of mind. That's where your patterns, your beliefs, your emotions, your stories all lie, but not logical thinking, not intuitive wisdom, but stories. And they're running around playing 24/7. And they were all learned because you somewhere along the lines were taught basically you're not enough because you were bad or you weren't good or you acted like a baby instead of a big girl or boy. You suffer because you're ignorant to the fact that you're amazing and you misidentify as shitty. You misidentify as your ego. And if your ego is your nervous system, and your nervous system is very implanted in your body, like every section, centimeter, whatever within your body, then there's just no removing it. So how do you navigate recognizing what's ego and what's not ego? We'll talk about that in a minute because there is an answer to all of the things. So if you are ignorant to who you truly are because you're amazing and you misidentify as your body, your emotions, and your thoughts, therefore you're guilty, you're stupid, you're ugly, the ego is attached. So you suffer from attachments. And those attachments, again, rooted in the nervous system, are based on feeling good. We learned long ago through evolution, right, of our nervous system, the nervous system kept the human body alive. It thought faster than the human did. The body, but it is part of the body. So it was able to, on a fast track, save the caveman from being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or jumping off of a cliff or falling down and scraping his knee. The nervous system was very important to living and learned attachment-wise to stay alive, I feel good. But now modern day living has brought us to like degrees and language and material belongings being a flex. And therefore, we only feel good when? When do you feel good? Like if you're attached to feeling good and you don't even know when do you feel good. Well, often you feel good if you get a lot of likes on your social media, right? Often you will get what feels good. Having somebody like tell me I'm great feels good. Just to be straight up. Um, Getting hugs feels good. Feeling, yeah, like what feels good. When I'm avoiding, which is the fourth klesha, but we're not going there. When I'm avoiding whatever, an emotion, what feels good is to numb out. So I will drink alcohol. I will take drugs. So then now can you see how the attachment to feeling good is actually working against me? I'm attached to feeling good, and being numb is feeling good. So then this brings us to the fourth. So if I'm ignorant to who I am, I misidentify of who I am not. I become attached to feeling good and I become averse to feeling bad. So that again, let's go back to caveman days and see how the nervous system, like scraping the knee, that feels bad. I don't want to feel bad. Right? Oh, I'm really hungry. That feels bad. Actually, essentially, these things lead to my death. As a caveman, a scrape on my knee could kill me because of bacteria on my skin, in my wound, that becomes an infection that essentially becomes septic and kills me. So that was bad. That was a bad feeling. I don't want to feel that because I watched someone scrape their knee 3 weeks ago and they're dead now. That feels bad. And now we move to modern day where feeling bad could be sobering up, right? Where we label releasing emotion as feeling bad. And that's not true, actually. Releasing emotion is no label. It's not good or bad. It's just releasing emotion. But we attach and avoid, and then we make up labels around that. And then therefore, just look at this as a cycle of suffering, right? I don't realize I'm amazing and that my feelings are natural and that when I release them, there's nothing really to it. It's just releasing emotion. So instead, I attach to the fact that I'm a loser and that when I emote, that's bad. And look at people watching me cry, they think I'm an idiot. That doesn't feel good to me, so I'm going to stop crying, which crying in public and having somebody look at me is bad. And therefore, now I'm actually holding on to my emotions, which will eventually become tension, which will eventually become an injury, which will eventually possibly become a chronic ailment that could lead to the death because I stress about this and now I have heart disease. Like, the reality is the opposite of what we think, but we got the first one messed up, and then that is like it's like a snowball of crap. It's a crap snowball that takes us to a place of living in our own suffering and not knowing where to go or how to get out of it. And so essentially the fifth klesha is fear, and that fear is really related to death. Most of the time, if I bring that up, people don't say, oh yeah, like I'm afraid, I need to make money this month or I will die. The reality is that if I ask you why, eventually your fear will come back to death. Pretty much always. If you're like, I need to make $5,000 a month, and then I'm like, why? And you're like, because I have bills to pay, so don't pay them. Well, if I don't pay them, then I don't have a home to live on. So what? Well, but then I'll live on the streets. So what? Well, it's cold on the streets. Well, so what? Well, I could die. I promise it always comes back to that, unless, of course, I've said this and now you're going to prove me wrong. Then, but the fear is the fear of death. And that's the only reason why we have fear. Let's go back to the nervous system. What is fear? Fear is recognizing there's a threat and then trying to save oneself from it. In our modern days, we don't have a lot of threats that are actual real threats. So once again, we're just stuck in a cycle. Can you see how these things do contribute to us in a cycle of suffering? Again, let's just go through it again. So number one, you're ignorant. You're ignorant that you're amazing. And I mean, amazing also holds like a label to it. It's just like you're ignorant to the fact that you are. And that's it. There's nothing else related to that. So when you are ignorant to the fact that you are, then you relate to the fact that you are not. You are not pretty enough. You're not thin enough. You're not smart enough. You're not popular enough. You're not blank enough. And when you misidentify as you are not, then there becomes attachment and avoidance. And so you attach to what feels good and you avoid what feels bad. And these are labels that you create in your own mind and therefore stay attached to things that you are not. You are not good and you are not bad. You are not right. You are not wrong. You are. And the reason is because we fear. And so we fear that, we're going to lose what feels good. And we fear that we're going to always be in a bad place. And none of those are true. So the question becomes, well, then how do I heal? How do I find happiness? And the sutras tell us by going back to number one. That's it. How do you stop suffering? You remember who you are. And what was our class last week? Who am I? Who am I? You're not your labels. You're not your stories. You're not your emotions. You're not your thoughts. You're not your body. So who are you? And the yoga answer is you're God. You are the universe. You are part of the universe. So why would you suffer? I'm sitting with that because I have a million more directions to go, but it feels like each one is like its own its whole own podcast to dive into even deeper. So I can use an example. I use the example right now because when it comes to attachment, a lot of people will understand and buy into the attachment that you can let go. Whatever you own owns you. So you can let go of the idea of like your car or your home because often like why are you paying your bills so you can have a home and that home really only needs to be like 4 pieces of wood, maybe some insulation, like a bed and a bucket. So why is that not enough? And it has to be 8,000 square feet and have a price tag of 1.5 million on it, because then when you own that, that owns you, right? You can't just go away and leave your $8.5 million home like on its own. You need to like make sure do the things. So lots of people can be like, okay, I get that. I get that. I get that. But the unattachment also comes to your attachment to your family, your attachment to the outcome of situations with people that you love. And so I have a granddaughter, and mine. See, she's mine. She's not mine. One thing I learned when I had kids and I was listening to Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, he really shifted things for me because what he said was, you had your kids, but they're not yours. Like I was literally a vessel for them to pass through, and then also a vessel to nurture them until they could nurture themselves. Many a horror story is built on 2-year-olds like raised by wolves or by a ghost or whatever. So we also know that, children are pretty resilient, and that we get attached to what that looks like as a successful outcome for a child. So I had kids, but they're not mine. And then that child that is not mine also had a baby that is not hers. And that baby that is not her body came in with a genetic disorder, with damaged lungs, with holes in her heart, and now, to add to everything, also came in with this genetic predisposition for leukemia, and already has those changes being made in her body. So we have like a 3.5 month old little perfect human being that smiles and wiggles and cries and cuddles that we question how long she's going to live for, like every day. And can't really take a lot of things into her own hands because she needs care. And the care is shit, by the way. The medical system is so broken. Um, but also I didn't mean to like make it like that bad. It's just, yeah, it's a broken system, which is why I left it. So how do I unattach to a tiny little baby possibly having to go through? Because let's just talk about it. Like, if she doesn't have chemo, then what does that look like? And then if she does, what does that look like? This tiny baby that's already sick, I don't want either. I want her to not have to suffer that, but like either way causes suffering. So how can I unattach to, okay, the other part is now my daughter. My daughter is taking care of her daughter, or the daughter that she had. And um I'm really concerned about her and how her life will be when and if things go a certain way. I'm concerned about her. I'm concerned about addictions. I'm concerned about self-care. Like I call them judgments, but because I call them concerns, but I know that that's me masking my worry, and it's violent. It's violence against my daughter, because really what it's saying is I don't trust her path. That's even it. I don't trust her path, because in that I'm like, I don't trust her to do what I want her to do to make sure that she's okay if this happened, because this tiny little human has come to share clearly a lot with us. So how do I unattach? And then how do I stop avoiding as well? How do I stop attaching, and how do I stop avoiding? How do I stop avoiding the fact that, there's an emotion that's just like here all the time and I don't want to release it because that feels bad. I don't want to think about it, but I need to, in order to to be the medical expert on this side of things for my child and her child. And then how do I unattach to the outcome? And if I stand over here, I can see it, I can understand. That feels like the emergency room nurse in me, to be able to be like, okay, this is the journey that the child chose before she came here. And then sometimes I get into like, well, that's fantastical. And I don't know that to be true, because I've read how many books on soul contracts and like soul plan before we come into this earth, and how we go up and we make a contract with all our people, and then we come down, we play it out, and then we go back up and we make more plans. But I know that's our nervous system, my nervous system, trying to make sense of something that isn't sensical to the human body. Like, I will never fully understand beyond this. And I have had a situation, an enlightenment experience, that in which I felt it all. I did understand for like 10 minutes. And then it was gone. I came back to reality and I still had bills and I didn't die, and it was a whole thing. So I wanted to bring that up because I know that it's easy to sit here and to give the advice of like non-attachment, but it's not as easy to live that. How do I live these teachings that I believe in my body 100%? And then they're affecting me in a way like I'm avoiding things because I'm attached. I'm attached to my granddaughter living. I'm attached to my daughter, like at least being semi-happy. And I'm avoiding, anything around the opposite of that. And that's why I suffer. I don't cry because I don't want to in public. I suffer. So, how can I be a spirit having a human experience and come to a place of not suffering? I don't want to keep suffering. Suffering sucks. Because in that, like, when I suffer, I start thinking about, like, why am I even here? Like, things would just be better if I wasn't here. And I don't think that thoughts like that are incredibly helpful. They're for me now like an alarm. Beep, 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 beep. You're going in the wrong direction. Hey, beep, 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 beep. You're suffering. And remember how you stop suffering. It's not about like looking back at how I was raised and what my parents did to me and like how it's actually about looking forward and remembering that I'm amazing, that I am, and that there's nothing else to that other than I am. And when I can be there, then I can recognize that I also am in a body and that body has emotions. And that if I don't release or acknowledge those emotions, they cause tension, which causes injury, which eventually becomes chronic disease. That when I'm in fear, that this causes stress, which is the killer of most things, and that I am. And that my granddaughter October is, and that my daughter Summer is. And that's it. None of this is good or bad. It just is. And over the last little bit of thought, just as my closing thought, over the last little bit, I have thought about the fact that when things happen to little kids, the question is why. And I've heard like people say things about God and there can't be a God if this happens. And those thoughts do cross my mind once in a while I'm looking at this tiny little baby who's like just starting to smile and react. And then I think about all that she has going on, how she's being poked all day long and she's on oxygen and she's got an NG and she's got all these things going on. And then, the last couple of days have been really stressful, like testing for leukemia and stuff. And it's like, how could this kid literally have cancer right now? And what are we about to like move through? How can there be a God? And that is why those teachings never really have worked for me because it's not like that. This is the journey that October has chosen, and I have to trust it. And I'm still in a human body that has emotions that I need to feel, or I'm choosing to have an uncomfortable like quality of life. Which then comes to self-responsibility, which is another conversation we will be having. But this is where I'm going to close and just come back to like the ignorance. If you want to stop suffering, just remember that you are. Like you are a part of the experience of God. And therefore, everything that is going on is our consciousness co-creating consciousness in general, which is why space is constantly expanding because we want to like be so selfish as to like we're the only people in all of existence that are experiencing like planets and solar systems themselves aren't experiencing like trees aren't experiencing, which how many of you have been to my past life regressions and have been a tree or fog or a freaking rock. Like clearly there's an experience of those things, though it may be different than the human experience. And so that's where I'm going to end. So I want to thank everybody for coming.
Thank you for joining me on Yoga is Science. I hope today's episode offered you a fresh perspective on the incredible synergy between the ancient yogic practices and our modern day science. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who could benefit from these insights. And until next time, keep exploring the science of life.